project. But as the mayor said, we can't vote. We can't vote in this meeting. We can't vote in this meeting, but I would like to see if we can work towards some type of consensus where there's three commissioners that say, yes, this is what we're willing to do, because the next step then would be to incorporate the financial piece of this into the legal document. There's a draft of that in your packet also. But to finalize the legal document then, it would then come back to the city commission as part of a public hearing and adoption process. So if we could get the commission today to give us direction as to if any of these financial packages make sense to at least three of you, so that we can move forward. And that answers the questions before we turn the time over to Mr. Bellows, if there's any questions to me.
Lift station.
Yes.
Lift station and on the one.
Right.
That would service.
Yeah, what that would service is pretty much all the properties on the northwest corner of 1792 and Lee Road. So those apartments, the housing authority, a lot of those projects, all around there that currently serve sewer, they would then go into the station and into that.
To point that out, the ale house phase that's been built, the arrangement that was discussed with staff was that they would let that happen and a couple of the other paths surrounding it go into the existing system that is underneath 1792 and heads east, and is part of what they're suggesting to have some alleviation of that capacity. So in these numbers, which is a huge question, I'm glad you brought it up, is not only creating this lift station and one of two choices, which we've had meetings with the city managers of Winter Park and Maitland and the various utility department heads, is to take the balance of the project and put it into Maitland's existing sanitary system, and they will allow it if we will invest approximately $1,035,000 into fixing two bottlenecks that they have at Horatio 1702.
I'm going to start, Dan, by saying this is TMI, I think, on a specific subject. So maybe if we could hold that question and elevate it to a specific conversation. I would love to hear the overall summary and what we're being asked to do. And then that's, I think, a very specific question within that summary. But
the point is, in these numbers, is this lift station isn't just for Ravaudage. It is
right. So that's an excellent point.
Providing
that's an excellent point.
Capacity for Park Green and the Winter Park Housing Authority and everything to the west of Bennett, which then takes it where it's existing going under 72, it sends it west, and then creates additional capacities, citywide. So again, there's several pockets of numbers in here, just like that it's not just about.
So maybe you can point those out as we go through it. But we've come to I think, a seminal point, an important point in conversation. I don't know if it's deliberation, but certainly in conversation about certain things that we're being asked to do. And based on Mr. Knight's comments, I'd love for you all to describe why, some of the thinking behind, and then maybe we can start to look at some of those things.
Okay, I thought that Jan Carpenter for the CDD and the Ravaudage CDD has formed at its initial meeting, so we are now a separate entity from the developer entity. And I think at our last meeting, to sum up briefly, we left with the direction to city staff was what would it cost for the city to put in the basic infrastructure to build the roads, sewers, whatever would be needed there, not looking at what kind of development was going there, just basics. And then we've met with the city and gotten those numbers. And the ask was, at the last meeting, Mr. Knight put together the options, and we were looking for option one, which was a sharing of the various impact fees directly attributable to land in the CDD plus the ad valorem tax. And we heard a lot of message from you coming back on the tax especially.
So let's begin with that one point. So Randy, if you would just summarize what you identified as what you said was, I don't know if it's city responsibility, but what if Ravaudage was annexed into the city and was 50 homes or whatever it is today, the city would obviously have some infrastructure.
Right. In your packet, I believe it's the first document in order. There was one called City Staff Estimate of Basic Infrastructure Cost, And grand total, and this would be if the city were going to go in and put in the infrastructure to serve a commercial development in that acreage that's there at city standards, not at the enhanced standards that you see proposed in the book here. The
At
elect,
our code allows.
that are at our,
At our code allows development ordinance counties.
well,
The square footage.
our code doesn't
Yours.
cover infrastructure, so, you know, as far as how wide the streets are
It
and all
covers
that.
how much square footage
Oh,
of services.
But it's based on what's been presented by the developer.
Well, it's just the, right, and so now, with the electric number here is at an underground standard versus overhead, because that is our new standard. So there's $1.8 billion of electric undergrounding, based on city estimates, about 800,000 in streetlights, now that's Cobra head, you know, wood pole or concrete pole, oak street lighting, not the decorative. Water and sewer is about 3.8 million, and then roads, sidewalks, and drainage is about 3.75 million, for a total of $10,150,000. Now, this is not something that the city would be obligated to do.
Nor in any specific time frame.
That's correct.
I mean, we might do it over 50 years, we might do it over.
If we wanted to do it because we wanted to see it, if it were under multiple owners and we wanted to see it develop commercially, this is the basics of what you need to do to go in there and have it be able to develop, you know, based on the grid layout that he's provided. You might do it different.
So we have annexed, I mean, I think it's also important to note, we have annexed other areas into our city that we have not completed sewer, for example.
Right.
So that's an important thing to
Where else
look
do we
at.
have this level of infrastructure?
Well, there are no other places where we've annexed that didn't already have road infrastructure and all that in place. Now, the Fairbanks, obviously, we're putting in the sewer because it didn't have it, and that was also to allow that area to redevelop. But you know, the road was already there, and the sidewalks, as they were already there.
Randy, another question which follows up to the commissioner's question, which is of the water and sewer, I'm looking at your numbers, because for
3.8.
whatever reason I can't find it on my Dropbox. But the 3.8, what portion of that has been done, or,
About 300.
well, I'm gonna ask that over the whole thing, but what would that I don't know what that thing you described, but the overall collection station or whatever, that's,
About 334,000 of that water and sewer's already been done.
and that was the only thing that's been done
No,
at this
there's
point?
been some electric undergrounding that's also been done. And I don't-
It's in our agenda packet too. It's on the financial.
We've spent 2.2 million in cash, and the city has spent 334,000 for what you see out there today.
That includes the electric bill?
That is not correct, the electric.
I'd have to get you the electric number.
But inherent within the 3.8 million is
About 1.2 million,
1.2 million is that specific project.
which Dan described, and really there's two options, as he mentioned. There's one to take it out to Wymore, and then there's another to take it up through Maitland, and then,
And has that been on any of our CIP projects up to this point?
no, sir.
Is Lee Road on sewer maintenance?
Most of Lee Road is on sewer. Right, check.
There's conflicts in Lee Road, Stevens here.
Because the frontage on Lee Road, all the way out to the end of the city line, are they on sewer and septic? I mean, Fairbanks was on septic, and that's the problem.
I believe
there's two.
I don't want to guess, do we know?
Most of the Lee Road, Wymore intersection, local ways back, about a quarter mile back from the intersection, that's all sewer. There's a gap in the middle, but it's not.
And so would this sewer line service those people that are not currently on sewer? If we go down Lee?
it gives well, it won't go down Lee, it will go down, Monroe.
But how many Winter Park residents are out there?
Winter Park Housing Authority, and you have Park Green. Thank you.
On the north
Give me
side.
an idea about how many.
Then on the
people-
south side, there's a lot of homes in all these parts.
Or how many, okay, so there's a lot of homes
Include
over
the
there.
apartments, probably thousands.
What about the commercial? That's my concern, because that's what.
Yeah, I believe the commercial-
Massive.
Was Jeff was saying, the commercial on Lee Road,
It's just that gap.
Yeah, and the gap in the middle, which is all office has so little usage, they're probably just gonna stay under septic, even in redevelopment scenarios. Commercial at Wymore needed sewer, and then the commercial here at the 1792 intersection needs it.
So are we in agreement that that's a possibility, again, there'd be no time, there'd be no, and we have
What's
annex.
the possibility? The whole 10 million or just one part?
Over time, we would probably
Okay.
expend this, it may be over 50 years, it may be over 100 years, I don't know, but over time,
The $10 million.
if the annexation had come in, or has come in, we would be making investments in certain things.
If the annexation had come in without the development of a community development district, the intent of the legislation for a community development district is to allow the developer to put the infrastructure in place and bond that and assess his development.
Yeah, I understand that, and that's not the
So-
point I'm trying to make. I'm trying to say if there was no CDD, if there was nothing there, over some period of time, the city would be investing in this.
Absolutely.
In
As
this,
development
well,
people.
just like we invest in Orvin Manor and put sewers in the 1970s and everywhere else, at some point, we would be doing that.
That's-
I'm not saying when, I'm not saying
our responsibility.
if, I'm just saying potentially. I mean, would you not ultimately underground streetlights there,
Bless you.
Commissioner? I mean, I think at some point you would probably. I'm not saying it'd be the first
I
thing,
mean,
but.
let's continue. I'll stick with potential.
So I would like to at least have some agreement with that. I'm not saying on the amount, I'm not saying that's something we're gonna fund the CDD. I'm just saying that at some point, I think there is some responsibility for the city to do something. That's the point.
And I want to point out one other thing along that same line of what serves more than just Ravaudage. Within the road sidewalks drainage piece is a 72-inch pipe that runs basically from Lee Road into Lake Jim that is failing and long been and it would have to be either repaired or replaced at some point, and Troy estimates that's somewhere in the $1 million range.
And is that in that number
That's
today?
in the 3.75.
So that's a pipe that we own today?
Correct.
That's our pipe. So,
We inherited that.
so
when we
so
annexed.
likewise, I'm assuming that we have somewhere a budget for
Yes.
the replacement of pipes.
Somewhere utilities.
So that would be something that we would potentially could apply to that, correct?
Yes.
That's all.
No, this isn't a stormwater side, so there are no impact fees there. It would be the stormwater utility fee that we collect.
So we have that kind of generally on the table that we.
We have sewer impact fees, not stormwater.
So Dan, do you want to continue, please, then, in terms of some of the other things? Because I know the request goes upwards of 70 million. And then, I know, I think the CDD is making the case, or I don't know if you're going to speak for it. The CDD is making the case that there's a way to do this in a more timely fashion in addition to sharing the revenues. So,
Yes, I mean, after the discussion at the last workshop, it seemed that there are some needs, as Randy pointed out, that are more immediate. So it might make sense to have a cash influx now and allow those things to happen more immediately, meaning roads, fixing the pipes that need to be fixed, doing the things that have to happen for the immediate development, particularly of usually the lots around the outskirts, the edges, because those are the ones that will develop first. And then, in one of the other handouts, you had asked, what was it that Ravaudage would be building as infrastructure? What would the CDD be doing to match the development? And that number was 75 million. And, taking out the 10 million plus the 2 that's already been put into it, there's about a $63 million of public improvements. And again, we won't get into the discussion of what everyone thinks is public, not public, parking garage is not, but these are public improvements, water, sewer, roads, all the necessary things to develop, and those would be owned by the CDD or dedicated to the city in the typical manner, and they'd be operated independently of the developer, although the developer is the one that will have to pay anything that the CDD can't either finance or receive via grant or some other method. So that's really the gap we're looking at, is, it's 75 million, and then there's this 10 that, hopefully we can come up with some way of what is immediate need that could be a cash influx to allow contracts to start right away, and then looking at the sort of what we see as the riskless way for the city to go through impact fees, others to help pay for some of the other improvements. And that was, I believe, where the whole cooperation agreement started, and it has been happening in South Florida and a couple other places, to say from impact fees, If the development doesn't develop, the city pays nothing. If the development develops, then those monies, a portion of them will go back to the CDD to pay back bonds that build the infrastructure. So it's a way for the city of getting this area developed quickly, getting a higher class development than would probably happen if the developer left and ended up just being selling parcels off of the city and putting the roads. And so that's really the purpose of the CDD, is to allow for a quicker way of building infrastructure, allow for a government to take care of the infrastructure, for the things that the city doesn't do, as we go through that discussion. So I think where we are is the 10 million is sort of the minimum the city looks at that it would take to develop that area. And we're looking at a 73 million, so we have a pretty big gap we need to fill. And the proposals we submitted were sharing ad valorem tax and then sharing the impact fees as a way for no one else in the city of Winter Park to pay for any of the improvements for public users.
But we do forego future revenue that the city would be entitled to and would use for other capital improvements, whether it would be to do gardens, whether it would be to build parking
Which
structure,
certainly-
city hall.
Which
A
certainly
portion
makes,
thereof.
yes, which
That is
makes
not
sense.
coming in today.
No,
But what the developer's perspective is, without some sharing, the development won't happen, or won't happen quickly, and that money won't be coming in. So actually, the city would be getting more by doing this than it would if they waited the 8 or 10 years to develop a very slow, long time development. And I believe that's what the various cash flows that were run by Peter Moore and others were showing, that if this develops quickly, this is what comes in, what the benefit to the city, you won't be losing.
And Tom, I hope you appreciate, I believe this is the performance-based program that I've heard you discuss several times. If the private developer is not performing, then there is nothing the city is giving up. If the developer is out there performing and continuing to invest millions in infrastructure on their side, then this trickle of potential revenue would be coming in. And I hope that we see that's not from the general fund and it is only based upon performance.
Yeah, and we'll continue to discuss. I just have a philosophical problem with this. And it really is just, I'll lay it on the line. I mean, if you had a $63 million shortfall in the project, what are you doing there? I mean, that just get to this point and say, hey, I can't do this without a $63 million influx. I'm looking at that pro forma and saying, how did we get here in the first place?
I have 12 city blocks, and I can do as mentioned here. We can just go develop the 12 city blocks. There isn't stormwater. There's only about 17% sewer, and the potable water system is really non-existent. It's a 2 to 20. So we can simply go out and build a bunch of single-family homes, or probably get some apartments going on 12 city blocks. And quite frankly, I think in 20 years, the city's going to have just what they have. That area needs, because of the dynamics of Maitland to the north, Eatonville to the west, where it sits, 154,000 cars a day going through there. In my opinion, doing land planning, it needs a mixed-use development like this. A bunch of single-family homes. The Winter Park Pines isn't going to survive there. So there's these 12 city blocks that if we left intact, in my opinion, and I said it to the city manager, $10 million isn't going to cut it. The city staff has said, we believe a basic number for basic infrastructure that we would have to do is this number. Doesn't include irrigation, doesn't include tree wells, doesn't include trees, doesn't include parks, land, parking, plazas, or anything. I believe the city would be paying double or triple if you had to go out there and provide the adequate roadway, sidewalks, lighting, underground for the 12 city blocks as they're currently configured.
To do what?
To build single-family
I'm not
houses.
in a real estate, the city is not in a real estate business. I think that's where this whole thing.
No, this is existing right of way that you, right or wrong,
That we have either.
That you've inherited.
A lot of it, part of it we've inherited. Part of it we've just been going through, we've just turned over numerous portions of the right of way. I mean, Dan, we're working with your plan. This isn't a city plan. This is a private developer that has come to the city and says, in order to do this, I have a $63 million shortfall. I'm still stumped at that. We have as a city, and I'm a lousy poker player, so I'm just putting my cards on the line here. We have as a city worked. We de-annexed it. We've allowed you to go out and get entitlements that you never would have gotten in the city of Winter Park. If some of the developers that I work, if CNL were here right now, they'd be salivating. 50 acres in Winter Park, the kind of entitlements that you have. I'm sorry to be brutally honest, but I think the cash flow problem is yours, not the city's. To be honest, I mean, that's just where I am, Dan. And I appreciate that.
So
I want to be candid
I'm
about
less
it.
interested in the $75 million, and I'm much more interested in if there's a portion that we believe we're gonna contribute or contribute,
Well,
share or whatever the word is.
can I back down with this last one?
By all means. I mean, it's very important, but
No,
the
that's-
upper end is not important to me. There is no way, shape, or form in any kind of plan that we could get the $75 million.
Now, I am intrigued, and I'm very willing to listen to, you've outlined some things here, whether it's a lift station that helps serve portions of the city that we need, whether it's a 72-inch pipe that will enhance the city's stormwater capacity, or at least maintain it to the point that we are now.
Which we have to do anyway.
Which we someday would have to do anyways, or whether it's what we need to do to help connect the sanitary sewer up to Maitland. Those are individual capital improvement projects that I really view as a city project that in the long term, somewhere along the line, that we may need to do now. But beyond that, that's kind of the extent of that's how big my pot is. And that's just,
And I'm
So
having trouble
that's Tom
with
right
that.
now, so.
And I'd like an opportunity to address this.
So I kind of capitalize some things here, so I'll.
Well, feel free if you have something to share. We're going into our own opinions at this point, which are very, very important as part of this. I would like the city manager to speak. I thought we had some agreement of things that there would be no way that we even thought of at our last meeting.
Very cool, but
That
not
was-
parking garages.
No, I'm talking about where we would share options. I'm not talking about the
We
cost.
had about a $7 million
Yeah,
figure
so
that we came to the last time.
if
we met.
memory serves me, and Randy, do you remember this? But the ad valorem tax, we thought was totally off the table.
Seemed to be the consensus at the last meeting.
So let's start with that as consensus. There also is, and you've done some great work, as the team that looks at, I don't know if this is a 10 or 15-year review, but there's obviously things that are gonna cost us to care for that place that we need to pay for. And we've already said annexation has to pay for itself minimally, so that includes police, fire costs, et cetera. And it looks like it averages about, let's just call it $680,000 a year per se. So minimally, the $680,000 a year has to be paid, or else we couldn't put police or fire or whatever is necessary for that. Would most of that come out of the ad valorem tax? Probably, except the public works cost, probably? Actually, ad valorem doesn't pay for, basically pays for police and fire right now in our city, is that correct?
Right.
So parks and public works would be things that would have to be, so ad valorem was off the table. At least I thought it was based on
Absolutely.
based on heads nodded, okay?
I think that Steve had some interest in it still last time we talked, but you would,
And my point was,
Yeah.
from a discussion perspective.
right,
I like-
yeah, that was, everybody else was.
I'm fine with
Well, there's two heads, and I'm gonna add to that head. I'm ad valorem's, I can't consider. Water impact fees, which in this case would be sharing, and the city has an estimate of what those would be.
But wouldn't we still be able to choose how we spent the impact fees, that we could share them with Ravaudage? If the impact fees came to us, we could make the decision that we need to fix that 72-inch pipe.
But the argument on the table here is incremental, am I correct?
Right.
So they're arguing that they're gonna do things that are gonna make that better, have more income for the city, and what they're saying is in exchange for that work that they're doing, risk and all that they're taking, that they would like to share some of that back. So I mean, that's a philosophical question that we have to answer probably before we go through any other line, is if somebody makes something better and wants a portion of that, is that something you want to share or not? Because if it's no, then our meeting, we can go get lunch.
The other thing is that we did reach this conclusion that was given to us last time, which was, we don't have any mechanism to say, oh, you just don't have to pay that. We can't say that, correct? That was what you told us. You said, we can't just say, okay, we're gonna forgive the impact fees, and then you can just go right on, and we'll make it like a credit to you, because that's not how it works. So we have to do, and the reason I'm saying that is because it's gonna have the same impact as saying that. That's what it's gonna have. It's gonna have the same, or in my mind it is, as saying, you know, that's money we would not have had.
Correct.
It's not money that we're taking out of our general revenue. It's not money we would have had otherwise. So it's new money that is coming to us to develop this area to make it new. And instead of us saying, we forgive you for those fees, we can't do that because that jeopardizes other funding. So we have to still charge it.
Right.
And that's important.
That's
Keep in mind-
right.
And keep in mind, whoever pays that is not, it's whoever's coming in to build on those properties.
Understood.
And the money would be reimbursed back to the CDD that
Right.
would be putting in the infrastructure.
Well, that's how it's palatable to me,
So,
okay? Because
I
it's
mean,
new
if it
money.
was forgiven
It's,
versus,
well,
no,
no, because you
mean,
can't forgive it. It's
so-
palatable to me because it's all new money.
So is there some of that you feel, and again, I'm trying to get a very large nut down to something incredibly manageable that I can count to, which requires some toes and fingers to figure that out. But, you know, as we look through the list, we've already said ad valorem,
No.
there's 3 that don't agree with that at all. As you look through the list, which was the side-by-side comparison which staff said, is there anything on this list that you said you would consider? Water impact fees, sewer impact fees. We wouldn't have a portion of these if it were not for this development.
Right.
Well, but are we also hearing that there's 2 that are dead set against any of this?
I don't know. I'm trying to go fee by fee.
Specific questions about the things that I thought I might be able to support in my.
So why don't we go fee by fee? And so water impact fees, is that something?
May I
I'm
talk
sorry.
about that one?
Yeah, let's talk about that one, but I'd like to see if there's 3 heads to say, yeah, I would consider water impact fees.
Water
Go
impact.
ahead and tell us, and then
I was
we'll
gonna
see
say,
if there's 3 heads.
Water impact fees are based on the, per unit, per ERU, which are equivalent residential unit, or per fixture, depending on what type of development happens there. We've estimated that the water impact fees for this development to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.2 million. And that's all dependent upon what actually gets built there. Some things have a larger impact. Restaurants have a very large impact fee, so if it ends up being all restaurants in there, the 1.2 million number would be a lot higher. If it ends up being all office buildings, that impact fee would be a lot lower. But the water lines going in there would be impact fee eligible expenditures.
So water impact fees, is that something people would consider, yes or no?
What does the legislation say you use the water impact fees for?
For expansion of the system.
And this would clearly be an expansion of the system. 3?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I would consider it. Now, I'm not considering it right now. By me saying I would consider it, I don't like 100% collected through such a date, and if you're wearing green, it's 50% through the next day, and if you're wearing purple, it's, you know, I think something that we, at least, and I don't want to completely, I want to hear the collective wisdom, but things that exceeded a certain time frame, we weren't real excited about, at least in our last meeting. Am I correct on that?
The time frame was too long.
Time frame was too long, and then we also clearly felt that that, at least I thought, sooner was better. Whatever we can do to inspire, incentivize, I guess is the right word to use. More rapid development means that we would have access to these funds quicker.
Similar to what we're doing on Fairbanks right now.
Yeah, sewer impact fees.
Sewer impact fees are similar to water impact fees. They're a larger number. And as it was mentioned earlier, there was no sewer within the Ravaudage development. So it would all be impact fee eligible, and I believe that amount was estimated about $2.6 million that would be generated by the development as outlined in the proposal.
So I would personally be willing, like water, of a percentage or an amount of whatever was generated by the project to have some sort of relationship, especially since that might be able to be leveraged for others. Are there three?
There is. Mr. Mayor, I also, in regards to these two, like that we actually have these capped here too this time, which sets a top limit, which is nice to see.
Stormwater utility fee.
Stormwater utility fee, as you recall, is charged to every property in the city of Winter Park based upon the pervious versus impervious.
So they pay that every year, just like.
That's an operating revenue. It comes into the stormwater fund. We currently spend about 35% on capital and 65% on operating citywide. But this would be new revenue coming into the city because until the structure's built there, you would not be paying a stormwater fee. Until there's something blocking the ground, you wouldn't be paying the fee.
Is there a fee on vacant land?
There is not.
So that land's
So
not
for
bringing
example,
anything
the
back.
ale house today would be the only thing paying a storm utility water fee.
Other than the few little small
Gotcha.
one-story buildings. that are
Gotcha.
there.
This one I would be more hesitant on, only because I don't, we all kind of live and die together on this one. To me, as a city, it's like, I don't know what the demands are of the stormwater utility over the next 10 or 15 years. We may need this for other projects that ultimately would impact that. I don't know what else would occur on Lee Road or other things.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
The point on this one, if you look at the drawing, and maybe to Commissioner McMackin's point, I, as the private developer, if I'm going to go out there and develop a project in buildings, I'm required to provide stormwater, and I need to cough up whatever amount of land it is to provide adequate code stormwater. What I'm suggesting here is I can create something that I think is going to be very beneficial to the public and the community. It's going to cost a little bit more, but by doing this vertical wall assembly and creating this environment, it's probably 5 to 6 acres of land that I'm not using, and to Commissioner McMackin's point, I can then develop that. Well, that's great for me, but it's also great for the city, because that's 6 additional acres of land, of building permits, impact fees, ad valorem revenue, et cetera, The city has only, I believe, estimated about 400,000, unless that number maybe changed a little bit. But this is an extremely, I believe, important attribute to the project, and I would hope that you would see the benefit to the city by allowing us to develop as much land as we can by creating this type of stormwater environment would be something that you would consider.
And I appreciate that, and it is beautiful, and it's certainly something that I would love to figure out how we get done. Right now, I'm really focused on the amounts of monies that we think we may be able to share, and where it's gonna be spent is totally different conversation than are we even willing to look at this. So that's, and you're right, I'm assuming some of it would go to this, and if this pond could serve, all of Lee Road and other places, that might be an important thing for us.
It will also be a CDD-owned public amenity.
Yeah, and it is indeed beautiful, and I could see how it could be certainly that. Stormwater utility fees.
I don't have a problem. I'd like to cap them too, though.
The amount you have on that side-by-side spreadsheet, the 940,000 is the estimated amount it would generate for 10 years. So that's what that amount represents.
Can we go back to the water here? Can we go back to the water just a second?
Well, we can, but we're
Yes,
moving
there-
on to, so
I
you
understand.
want to go back?
Yes, I do. We have a responsibility as a city facing us in the future, as you well know, to create an alternative water source. And the price tag on that used to be $40 million. Okay, the price tag, I understand, we have come up with a better way to use recycled water, but all of that is gonna take significant capital investment from the city of Winter Park. Are those dollars that could be used in the future to help with that infrastructure in the city of Winter Park. So to be giving up revenue that comes in, to me, it's just.
Well, it could come out.
I'm aware, but there won't be any
You
revenue.
won't
in this
have
case.
the
So that's-
revenue.
That's
And
part
that's
of the
where-
question
that's
that
where I
maybe
go.
you don't understand.
No, I understand.
Or others
No,
don't
I
understand.
just don't agree with you that without subsidies from the government, this development will not happen in this marketplace. I believe.
You disagree with that?
I absolutely believe.
Well, first of all, I don't know that this is a
That-
subsidy, and I don't know that this is something.
That we have seen a turn in the market, we have seen development. And I do believe that the market will allow development on this property. You're right, it won't be as fast, there's no doubt about that, but can the market absorb that many more residential units and that much more leasable square footage? Why can't we allow the market need to drive the development at a rate that is prepared to absorb it? I have a really hard time with, is this the role of government? Is it the role of government to subsidize one developer over another? And I clearly feel it is not.
I think you're oversimplifying when you make a statement
And I
like
think
that.
I can get as detailed as you want.
I know, but when you say, oh, is it our role to choose one developer quote over another, and I don't feel that way at all. There's only one developer here right now.
With a CDD,
With a
too.
CDD.
And we're
The
actually
CDD is
negotiating
what
with a
we're looking
CDD,
at, and
yeah.
that's what we're dealing with, is what would we be spending if we, in the city, were responsible for this? And how much of that, which we wouldn't be getting until over a longer period of time, are we willing to share? That's exactly what it is, when that entity gets started.
So I'd like to continue on, and your points are very well taken. Electric franchise fee, is that something we would or wouldn't share? Now, today, as I understand it, we serve nothing in there, is that correct, Jerry?
And have we
And
finished
so-
negotiations to know
so-
if we're serving more?
Do we know where that is? And I don't know if you can address that,
Well,
Mr. Knight.
the franchise fee comes in regardless of whether the city serves or
Okay.
Duke Energy serves. So we get that 6% franchise.
And do
fee.
we know if where we are in the status of the conversation in terms of being able to serve?
Yes, we have a negotiated agreement with Duke that we're still working on the final details of, but it would basically, as structured, would require the city to compensate Duke for each customer we take 2.5 times gross revenue.
For a year or?
For 1 year, I'm sorry, 2.5 times 1 year's revenue.
So today, there's
What's the baseline?
three houses.
No, the baseline would be though, over the next 20 years, anything that develops in there, you do a 1 year look back once it's in service, paying 2.5 times gross revenue, and it'd be your customer forever.
Can the CDD influence those conversations at all, either way? Did you want to weigh in on that? Other than please, or other may I?
We certainly can try. We don't have, I mean, we have the authority for utilities, but it's really a private agreement between the city. We looked at this, and we're happy to join,
The
and
Public
at least
Service
put a voice
Commission
in.
Would be the only ones that
Yeah.
we would have to do that.
And
I'll be blunt, without that, I'm less interested in this one, only because it seems like, I mean, it might be something over time, I might consider some portion of it. But we would need to I would want to figure out how much that cost, which I guess you figured out what this would be, so we could figure out how much the revenue and everything would offset.
I do remember Jerry one telling us he wanted to serve that area.
Absolutely.
So as soon as
I think
he
that's-
served that area, we'll be getting money from another old source.
I think that's-
That makes sense.
that's a fair-
So,
fair
But
point.
I'm not sure that we're gonna be able to do that at this point.
Well,
Well,
perhaps
what
it
would
could,
this-
so perhaps it could be in here at a lower amount in the beginning to get that payback done, or as soon as you have the agreement figure, taking out that.
And what's the city's preference? Would they want you to continue to negotiate what you just described? Or is the city prepared to work with the district and the developer and have the developer actually go before the trade commission and argue the point, which is provided by statute, as to who the private developer wishes to have served the property?
Well, I'll tell you directly, I have no interest in having a utility fee shared personally until we clearly have a way to power things. That's just my own position. So, if the CDD or the developer or anybody else could help us in that regard, I would have more openness to considering this. Now, openness to considering it isn't doing it. I'm just saying I'd have more interest in it than
We
not.
took that off the table now and brought it back as it became an entity, it might make more sense.
Right, I want to make sure I made it clear, we get this.
You get this no matter
Either
what.
way, now, so the profit from the utility is what you're all really talking about, whether or not we're gonna get the profit from the utility also.
Sure.
But he's not asking that we share in
But,
the profit from the
but
utility.
think of it differently also, is this is part of the profit of the utility, whether we
Yes.
call it anything else or not, it is part of the profit of the utility. I would want to look at it holistically, personally, with the whole pro forma or whatever done. I don't know what a 20-year, I don't know, if we owned it from this point going forward and it developed, I would like the electric utility to make some determination of what demands that would make on us, how many megawatts.
Well, I don't want to do it for Duke Energy, I'd rather do it for the city.
Well, absolutely,
Yeah, so,
but
you know,
I mean, I think
there
that
you
would
go,
be
it's just
important,
plain-
that would be important to know,
Right.
I think. Water utility tax, Randy, do you want to just reference this for a moment?
Yeah, water utility tax is a 10% tax on the consumption of water within the city. So any new water we sell out there, a 10% utility tax is paid on top of that, it goes to the general fund. And so they're asking in option one, and they asked for 90% of that through 2023.
It's really a de minimis amount of money, really. at the end of the day. Unrestricted building permit fees. Explain that.
Yeah, of the building permit fees we receive, I think it's approximately 2/3 of that is restricted for the enforcement of the Florida Building Code. The other third is unrestricted. And so we could share that 1/3 back. And so this would be, if somebody came and pulled a permit, then approximately 1/3 of that is unrestricted and could be shared back.
And if we do that with the CDD, do we have to do that? I mean, does there have to be, would that have to apply to other entities that have permit fees or not necessarily?
Would not.
Because it would apply specifically to the CDD. That one I'm intrigued by, but I'm intrigued by it only in such a way that I would share more the quicker it got done and less the quicker it didn't get done, because quicker
And
in
that's
this
the way
case.
I think that's
That's
what
the way
it is.
it should be.
Yeah, they have 90% for the first 5 years and then 75% for the next 5 years.
This was all shortened up from the 30 years that was originally presented.
So-
Everything is down 10-year range now.
So those are interesting. I would be willing to look at that, one, just out of interest. I'm not saying I agree.
I agree.
Others? Others? Sure.
As I looked through our financial report today, the agenda packet, it showed that we had a balance in our impact fee funds. And then a minute ago, when I said to you, couldn't we make a decision to use our impact fees to fix a broken pipe or to, the funds that are available to us, are we restricted? Is that what you're saying to me? I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, the impact fee, both water and sewer, can only be used to buy capacity or expand the facilities. Or
So the
if
lift station
you took a
and-
2-inch line and expanded it to a 6-inch line, the incremental increase in capacity of that could be paid with impact fees. The replacement of the 2-inch line would have to come out of operating funds or our funds.
That's what I was trying to get a handle on, is if there are a couple of things in here that I might be comfortable with, is there a way to take care of getting those done legally without having to do some sharing?
So you're on to the next process question, which is a good one, and that is what would we spend money on? So I for one, have a heart for this sewer thing, especially if it allows us to do other sewer things down the road, which sounds important.
I think he said it didn't. I think he said that most of them would stay on sewer along Lee Road. That most of the redevelopment property would continue to stay on sewer. I mean, on septic and not sewer.
Right, but anything developed in there would be on sewer, it's in the septic. Anything developed within Ravaudage.
No, I understand that. I understand.
And I'm assuming for an investment of sewer, there is some return on investment that we could determine what that would be.
Yes.
So that would be important, and to me, I don't know if you think that is a city requirement or not, but it sure feels like it's more a city requirement a developer requirement. Thus, if that project, if 50 acres came in and it was homes today and they were on septic, we'd have some plan over some period of time to get it on sewer.
Now, there's two, did I understand there were two sewer
I was gonna talk about the
projects
next one,
discussed?
which is
Yes,
the
because
pipe.
One is a lift station.
Right.
That gets us down.
They're both the stations. One has a force main to meet the bill, the other one has a force main to maintenance gravity
That's
system.
the other one I was talking about, the second one was. the one
So the
that-
$1 million
There were
pipe
two, and
that's-
they both involve
Lift station.
lift station.
One
Running,
just has a shorter force main.
But
One's
it's
going
either
one way,
or.
one's going the other way.
Correct.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah,
both,
that's either
one or
or.
the other.
So, but that's $1 million too, am I correct, so I understand it?
Can I- all right.
By all means, go ahead.
I'm sorry. So we wouldn't need to do both. We could choose one, and that would,
Correct, it's one or the other. Eatonville was having a hard time allowing the force main to run through some property, which got us into discussions with Maitland. Maitland, after months and months, determined there was capacity in their pipes, but they had a bottleneck.
they have something that they need resolved
Right.
to allow this to happen.
Right.
So I personally would love to see the return on investment from $1.2 million of sewer lift stations that would
Free of capacity.
generate X number of whatever million gallons of sewer capacity, or would provide us some revenue or whatever in the treatment process. And where we go to get that money, I don't know, but, you know, impact fees sound like a real positive place to go get it from.
I need to understand who it serves other than Ravaudage.
Park Green, Winter Park.
We can get you specific. I think David sent you that, you know.
So,
It was just, it was the names of places.
Okay.
And my question is, what new development will this investment
New
generate?
development.
Yeah, where are we talking about going that will allow the next person to come in and look to it and develop something nice?
Basically across the street of 1702, Park, Corporate Square, Winter Park Dodge, and anything east of 1792, capacity is freed up.
See, because my big question was the Kmart Shopping Center, the new development.
and does that help this or
Where is
not?
drawing?
Is that separate? I don't know if staff.
That's what I'm
or
asking.
anybody-
If
Dave, do you want to
this is
come up?
really only Ravaudage, I need to understand that. If it's Ravaudage plus Kmart plus.
And that's a
plus-
great question. I've understood it served a much broader region of our city, not just Ravaudage. It just so happened to benefit Ravaudage.
That's what I'm trying.
Kmart has its own lift station, or that area does, and it's already being upgraded and handled independent, completely independent of this. What this project will do is the sewer everything that's served that's west of Ravaudage that currently flows through Ravaudage across 1792 and trickles its way all the way through the city and ends up up at Howell Branch Road. This, picking up with that capacity and to serve Ravaudage and intercept everything that's going through it now, will free up that same amount of capacity throughout our system east of 1792.
And that's a good thing or a
It
bad
is a
thing?
good thing.
Okay.
David, does that allow, would this line be sized, because really west of where we are right now, there's a car, there's a car dealership, there's, well, okay, west of us, okay, where he's talking, what do we have there that?
There's apartments, there's single-family residence, there's some commercial, PSI's office.
All right, so that's the general area we're talking about.
So
we
housing
would-
authority.
So we would then free up whatever capacity is currently taken up by those folks.
That's correct.
Would free up lines elsewhere in the city for
For
either
growth,
better,
expansion.
either better service and or more service.
That's
In
exactly right.
from that standpoint, okay.
Now, for me, I don't know if, to me, that's something that if I was doing it, personally, I'd want to own. I don't know that I want the CDD to. We would own that. Okay.
That sounds like
The pipe to Lake Gem, and I'm just describing it affectionately, which I'm sure it's not just a straight pipe that goes to Lake Gem, but that is, where is that on the replacement, or is there funding for that today somewhere in a capital budget, or?
That's a Troy question, it's
Okay.
stormwater.
I always confuse which pipe we're working with.
that.
There's three pipes, right? There's water we drink, there's water we gotta go clean, and then there's water that comes from our storms. I did learn only 1/4 of our water that comes from the sky gets to the aquifer. I did learn that recently.
far as that pipe goes, the failure is at the joints. And so it's something that we would go in and fix the joints as they were problems. That would be our strategy. And, that's not a huge cost because it would be spread out over a period of time. It's not like,
So we would just fund that in our normal budgets or
Correct.
whatever?
Correct.
Is there anything on the west, what would be the north side of Killarney, that we need to do stormwater-wise, like we're doing on the south side of Killarney? North side versus south side? We've been doing a lot of projects along Fairbanks, parcels here, parcels there, the sewer project, et cetera.
Not along the north side.
No, I'm
No,
not talking
that's-
about that. I'm
the
talking
north
about
side
all
would
the
be the Lee Road-
stormwater we've
the Lee Road
purchased
side.
over the last few years to help Fairbanks. And-
Yeah, because we would not be proposing any
So there's
major
no,
projects.
that's in much better shape, I guess, than the south side in terms of stormwater flow? Is that
Yes.
safe to say?
Yes.
Okay.
But we clearly, the road Bennett Avenue has been depressing. The county has been out there over the years, literally having to fix sections of pipe, fix the road base. It is a major issue. So I appreciate what Troy's saying, but tomorrow, this section could collapse. What's happening is it's a 6-foot diameter pipe, and at the joints, it's bringing all the soil in, it's sucking the soil in. When you get so much soil in there, then the base drops, the road drops. They shut that road down all the time when the county has it. Now, it's a city road, and as part of the DRC process, the city was requiring me to realign Bennett Avenue where it hits the road to be an executive. So, it was all these discussions that we were gonna fix the storm pipe, fix this road base, realign the road, and provide this opportunity for a traffic light. So it's a
Troy, is it fair to say that those pipes start to fail at the joints, and then it just continues on? I mean, the joints kind of usually the first place these things fail, correct?
Well, I believe that this is a concrete pipe.
Right.
And so, yes, when the joint material will go away after 40, 50 years. And so, that's where you are going to see the
So
problem.
even just, my point is just band-aiding it, we're still gonna need a major fix on that pipe connection.
And that was a pipe that was long before the CDD,
Yeah,
long before
yeah, right.
annexation,
And
long before.
we would have to take care of that.
It also goes
Yeah.
into Lake Jim untreated at this point.
So then, Killarney, but there might be other lakes that are not outflows.
See, the question that I would have to feel comfortable with, Troy, is if you take this issue, which is obviously an issue, and you compared it with the infrastructure throughout the city of Winter Park, and you started to prioritize all of the needs that you have, is this at the top of the pile? That's the thing I'm struggling with personally.
Right. And the answer is no, it's not, this is not a specific project in our 5-year capital plan. So that would tell you that it's not, it's at least not in our next 5 years. But also keep in mind, we're only proposing doing it out of the new revenues generated by the project. So we're not taking money away from any of the existing projects to do it. But your point is valid.
Future revenue that would.
Correct.
But it also wasn't in our 5-year plan because we didn't have that pipe in our 5-year plan. We made that 5
We
years.
also didn't
We
have
just
the
took
That's what
that
I was
pipe.
asking. If it-
We also
if
didn't
it
have the
had that,
revenue in
where
the
would
fight.
it
Right, we didn't
fall?
have the revenue.
Commissioner Rivers pointed out something you brought up at a previous meeting. A home developer has gone hard on their deposit. Their only way to get out of it is if this infrastructure we're talking about, which includes 2 blocks of Bennett Avenue, the stormwater area, and that one-way street on the left of the pond. Upon that is a condition precedent. Upon that being done, starts the clock. In 30 days, they must close. So if we can fix that section of Bennett Avenue and get that roadway done, 30 days later, 60 for sale for sale townhomes will be constructed. And that's that's impact fees, building permits, electric, water, utility bills. That's 60 units that will immediately go in. So that's where, I don't know, how the city moves things up the ladder. Here's one that if this is done, there is a contract, it's hard money, this will happen.
Electric undergrounding, I'm assuming we're not in the business of undergrounding new lines.
Correct.
So electric is not something we would do unless we had a clear path to take it over, and if there was, I'm looking at your would be the process if Duke said it's ours now, maybe you can come on up. If Duke said, we'll be happy to, whatever the negotiation, and we think it's a good deal, I don't know what we physically would have to invest to be able to take over. Is there anything, or is that just a switch that we flip?
I'm not entirely sure what you're asking. If we
Well, I'm
bring
asking-
you the territorial agreement. and
Today, if we
approve
get the
it,
territorial agreement, is there some capital or infrastructure that we have to invest to be able to serve the to serve the new territory?
ultimately, we would have to increase the cable size that goes between our substation and the corner of Lee Road and 1792, but that's not necessary initially.
Okay, that's standard streetlights, Randy, is that something that we would do?
Yes.
And are all the streetlights in the city that we've ever annexed, are they all on whatever streetlights we would do? And over what time frame would we do streetlights?
We only do streetlights as soon as somebody asks for them. And we have a standard, they're X feet apart and it's a certain.
So we have a process.
It's the Cobra head.
And if somebody wants a
They want decorative.
gold-plated one or whatever, there's a process that says you can pay more for it.
Right, and in this, for street lighting, we have a tariff for these decorative lights that an owner can pay if they want it.
Even if it's to Duke or somebody else,
Right, Duke also has tariffs for
so
decorative.
they would be able to pay them. And then road, sidewalks, and drainage, I'm trying to understand what part of that we would or wouldn't do.
And that's an interesting question. Some of these roads are city roads now, and some of them are ready to be repaved, so we would clearly at least repave them. We wouldn't necessarily make them as wide as the developer is, or the sidewalks as wide as they're proposing. Though we have seen, where we have done that is a nice, Park Avenue, even Fairbanks is nicer than normal.
Do you have some sense of what that would be in terms of money?
The repaving,
Yeah.
Troy, you told me it's been so long ago now.
Well, if we simply went in and repaved what's there now, it's probably on the order of 200 grand.
But there are no sidewalks out there, and obviously for commercial, you want sidewalks.
Well, that's very helpful. I think that kind of has some parameters, at least of some of the things that we'd be willing to spend, what we might be willing to fund it with. And then I think we have some parameters of what we think we may not, what we may want to spend money on.
Wasn't this 3.7 million road and sidewalks drainage, the portion of the developer's proposal? The city thought
if we went in and-
cost to do,
Yes.
not with the enhanced size of the
Right.
sidewalks.
If we went in and put them, where the developer's proposing they be put, redid the base, did the sidewalks, and the drainage related to those roads, because there's no drainage out there either. That's what that number is.
One of the other things that was important to me was that the city never have to go in the hole for this development. So just keeping that in mind, because there were, in the very beginning, started looking for some of the projections where if we went ahead and did something, we would actually be in the minus column for a year or so before the come up, and I just don't think we can have to do that.
I think when you pulled out the water taxes, you came way away
Right.
from that problem.
Just wanted to remind us before we put this together again.
Okay, and the only other thing I'd like to mention, that's come up quite a few times in questions, is how do you distinguish this from other people coming in to ask? And I think the biggest thing in the 30 years I've lived here is this is the only annexation, the only development that actually is an annexation with roads and infrastructure in place or sort of in place as it may be. Winter Park Village was a shopping center, it is a shopping center. New hotels being planned, they're on hotels, they're in commercial areas. And that I think is a big difference in really why a CBD was appropriate and why I think it's appropriate to come and ask for this. It's very different from an area that already had utilities for that use there.
So now I want to ask this question to the commission. I've heard what they want. I guess my question is, what do we want?
Me first?
I'm open to whoever wants to talk about it.
We talk about master planning in the city a lot, and we talk about how do we take what we have and plan it out properly. And that's what I love about this plan, is it's actually a plan. It's not just a developer going to sell off a plot here, a pad here, he's actually laid this thing out. The city would be on the hook for a certain amount of dollars if he just went ahead and did it that way. But I think we all want a plan down the quest that can be done. So as we look at incremental revenues and sharing those incremental revenues, we've lowered it to 10 years. Commissioner Cooper, I take your point too about some of these long-term issues regarding water and some of those, but that's not going to be fixed in the next 10 years, and that's all we're talking about in my mind's eye, that we're sharing in the next 10 years. So I'm supportive of going down the path, Mr. Mayor, with the revenue share that you had laid out, the incremental revenue share in those areas. I'd like to see this thing get done. I'd like to see it done get done quickly. It helps our tax base the quicker we get it done. So I just like to keep moving this process forward.
Other comments?
I have obviously slightly different philosophy about this. I am trying to look at what things I might be able to get comfortable with. I'm really working on that. But from
So what are those things, Commissioner?
I'm not there yet. From a philosophical perspective, what I would say is why does a municipality annex? The reason we annex is to control the development and increase the revenues to the city. Why do we need the revenues? We need the revenues for fire and police and things that we're not talking about. Those numbers include within existing capacity for our fire department at the break. So what I would say to you is we annexed for two reasons: to control the development, which we're not doing. Orange County gave all the entitlements, and to increase our revenues, which we're now asking to share those. So those two things have fallen to the wayside for me. Then we look at what about a CDD? If you go and look at the legislation, it very clearly says that the reason you establish a CDD is to provide an alternate. That means not the city. An alternate means of providing infrastructure. And you're given the opportunity to get your money at more favorable rates. You've got higher density that you're being allowed. There are all kinds of benefits coming to you that don't go to other developers. So for me, the whole purpose was to have a CDD so that you could do this infrastructure and not burden other taxpayers. You know, you will say, I've heard you say 1,000 times, we're not burdening other taxpayers, we're only talking about future revenue. But that future revenue has needs already. We've got to develop alternative water sources. We've got to put parking garages here. We've got to deal with weed gardens. We've got to deal with rapidly escalated fire, pensions, and insurance payments. All of those things come out of the general fund. And every penny that we don't collect, in some way, we have to find to fix our infrastructure and our future capital needs. So for me, the whole purpose of annexing was to get more revenue into the general fund. The whole purpose of establishing a CDD was to allow them to provide the infrastructure, not us to have to pay for the infrastructure. So for me, I'm looking for those little things.
We did the CDD because it's the only instrument through which you can enter into the interlocal agreement. If the association or the private developer could have entered into this infrastructure agreement, the CDD would never have been a request. And what the commission has to understand is for me to be sitting here today, I started this process with the prior mayor, prior commissioners, and you get these green lights and you get these advances in a process. It would really surprise you as to all these things of annexation, de-annexation, financing structures. They're not, I don't wake up in the middle of the night with these ideas. They're given to me by people in this building. It's just frustrating that it takes years to get to this point. So that's why there's a district, because it is legally required to enter into an interlocal agreement.
And the district gives you the ability to assess those within your district.
There's not a bond market for a CDD to go out and float bonds without this type of structure. There's no market. Quite frankly, even with this market, it's a very small market.
So we're not being asked to share in that risk by sharing in commitment.
There's no risk. There's no risk at all. Zero risk. And I believe what you're gonna be left with is 100% more than what you would have been getting.
And keep in mind too, this is 10 years. This is not in
Exactly.
perpetuity, this is 10 years. So those future issues that you talk about, we will still be receiving revenue in totality in 2023.
And we'll be receiving ad valorem from the minute it opens, so
And from
that's.
a practical perspective, there probably won't be anything for the next year or two, so it's really a 8
That's
or
why the
9 year,
cash
which is why
commitment up front
the cash
gets it
commitment came
going.
in. But, and also I just have to add on the annexation, I know that it sounds like a very frustrating issue, and I was not involved during the annexation, but the standard statutory requirement is that you don't annex unless you feel you're gonna make money from it, given what's there, so.
Exactly.
So I mean, I think you have to look, that decision's been made and over, and this is sort of the, let's finance the
I think that,
development.
yeah, I think if
And we
each
made
one of
that
us, if
decision.
each one of us shared why we voted on it, there'd be
It's-
multiple different reasons, so we've heard them. If I look at the amounts, I can't add in my head, that's 2, 3, 6, 6, and 1, 5, is that 8? I was looking at water impact, sewer impact, stormwater utility. I threw the water utility in because it's de minimis, and the unrestricted building permit fees that are generated by the project, or generated by the CD.
That's cumulative over a period of time.
Yeah. But I'm just looking at the total amount. Because ultimately it has to come to some net present value for both of us. So
And I just,
it's a little bit more.
Well, it depends on what, if you're looking at the column 1.
I was looking at column 1, but I don't know.
He's got impact fees that exceed what we think the project will
Okay,
generate.
so
If you go
which
to
is a
column
better
two- If you go to
column?
column
Column
2,
two?
that's what we think the project can generate.
But then you have to add that.
Correct.
and I'd also suggest on the electric franchise, it sounds like the direction is only if the city gets it. It would make more sense to build that into the agreement now, so you didn't have to come back and renegotiate the point if it was possible. If that
You make
became,
that part of it.
make it part of it, if the
If
city,
the city,
It's 2,
it makes sense to add that in, so it's there from a
3.
financing.
But the mayor was
standpoint.
looking at option 1,
Six.
cap should be on the members of option 1.
And is this,
Yes.
He was looking at kind of column in option 2.
and is this Randy, is this based on a portion that we, 100% here, 90% there, I don't know,
Right,
those numbers,
correct.
those numbers are flexible, I assume, or negotiable.
Yes.
Something we'd have to
Yeah,
vote.
for stormwater, it was 100% for the first 10 minutes.
So it's such a small amount.
4, 8, and 1, 9 is really 6, 3, 6, 4. Probably much less.
It was real corners. Should be this.
and basically, the timing of something like this is that it's driven by how quickly then the development can start to happen. Because if this can happen, it's gonna happen more quickly. That's the whole bottom line, that's why I'm here. Otherwise, we can do this for 20 years, right, or 30 years, but this is gonna happen more
Or
quickly.
have what is there now.
Yeah, or we're gonna keep on having a piece of
Vacant.
property.
We're talking about less than 10% of this estimated infrastructure. So how can that possibly make such a huge difference financially?
I don't know that that's ours.
Not my job.
I don't know that that's mine.
Right, but it's our job to decide whether we give up future municipal
Well,
revenue or not.
you're taking 26 million out of parking garages right off the bat. So, I mean, it's
I don't see it as giving something up right now, because I see it in 10 years' time having a big value that we don't have right now at all. So that's how I'm looking at it, is a way to jumpstart something, get it going. I don't want to be involved in this part of it up here, I don't want to be involved in that part, I want just to be involved in this part here for now. And I guess the other piece is, how quickly could it start after the agreement was developed? I mean, you just gave us an idea, something, so.
So let's assume for a moment that we might want to invest $6.6 million in the CBD. What are we going to get?
Well, what are we anticipating full build out tax revenue?
Well, I don't mean that. I mean, what?
you're talking about bricks and mortar, roads, sidewalks.
Well, no, I'm talking about some sort of sharing that goes to CDD that, and I'm assuming the agreement would have to say, you shall prove that there's a road been built or we fund it, I mean, there's some ironclad way that we don't, you have to have paid your bills, I mean, people have to have paid their bills and the road has to be built and all that.
There's a set of civil engineering that's approved by the city, stamp. There's a pay app and a contract commensurate, and the draws are actually certified by city staff, and a check would come out if we did the straight pay, and that's how the $344,000 was done. I mean, we never touched the money. And to the ground on product that the city.
So, Commissioner Larry, you had suggested at one point that we might be interested in this if there was some land or something at the table. I'm very intrigued by that idea, and I think that if we said, you know, we're investing in this, we're gonna get a return from it ad valorem, but we're also gonna have 6 acres of city land that we look at and say, this is a gift to us or whatever, that would certainly, for me, make this much more palatable.
So we're back to talking
I
about
agree.
baseball field.
No, I
Did I
don't
say
even want to put a
baseball? I
tag
just
on it.
said
I
land.
think,
Well, I'm sorry, that's
I think
what
it's
the
important.
previous discussion was, is
Well,
the one with the baseball field in Ravaudage, and it coincidentally leads about this kind of acreage.
and the reason that came out of it was because I knew the baseball field, that they were donating, there was a grant of 6 acres to build a baseball field. So that's where I got my 6 acres
I
from.
mean, we have desperate need
Regardless of
for
what goes
city
on.
parkland, we have
Right.
desperate need for new fields, we have needs for lots of things in our
We
city.
may decide in the future to sell the land, if we
Yeah.
so choose.
Mayor,
We might sell it for $6 million.
It's public record, we've invested over $43 million in fee simple collection of this.
I buy all
With this money, with this program, and with the build out, we're not gonna get our money back. To give up 6 acres is impossible. The question and that was asked of us, and what we agreed to do, and we spent money on it, we surveyed it, did appraisals, agreed to the contract, is if it was a minor league baseball team that was prepared to build a $15 to $20 million stadium.
That's
and
all
something
behind
was
us.
gonna happen. That's how that discussion
I'm
came
talking about
up.
going forward, I'm talking about from this moment
Well,
forward.
to set aside 6 acres of land when we're already in the hole, and quite frankly, you know, I'm not sure, are we talking about 6.9 million as immediate cash plus the interlocal with those percentages for a 10 to 15 year? Because we somehow went from 10 million, 150 cash plus an interlocal.
I don't know that there's
I
ever
don't
been
know that we've
cash.
ever said cash here.
Yeah, I don't
I
think,
don't-
I've
I
never
don't
heard the
know
word
that
cash
either,
used
no.
in this room.
At the last meeting, I think what you're referring to, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, is that there was discussion about fronting some money to get the infrastructure kick-started. I don't think it was $6 million, but I definitely think there was discussion about possibly.
What I heard was the number that the city spent the cash on Fairbanks, which is frustrating. We're fully entitled to have a piece of land that things can happen, yet the city is spending money on Fairbanks, and there's no assemblage, no entitlement, and, you know.
Hey, Dan, I just think, Dan, back to the land thing, let me just get to it, because that was where I started, and that is, you're asking us to do something that's slightly unusual. And I think that having some land, we have skin in the game then, it's our land, we'd like to see it get up and running quicker too. It's just something that I think needs to be part of this deal. And if you can't do 6 acres, then tell us what you can do. But I think that if you're asking, you've got an ask in front of us, and I think we've got an ask back to you. We expect land out of the deal too. And I know you're in the whole money, and I get all that.
First of all, I mean, the 6 million, the district, I think, would take, but that's not what the ask was. It's not even remotely close to what the ask was. So it's having your cake and eat it too. I mean, it's, you know, and then what do you do with the land? I mean, we're out there planning, telling, you know, 6-story corporate office people what is gonna happen, apartment people. The city's sitting on a piece of land, you've got 25 acres, you know, sitting a couple hundred feet away. What are you doing with that? I mean, I don't understand. I assure you, I believe we are going to advance that land much better than the city.
Well, one thing we can clarify, if anybody came to this table thinking we were gonna get $75 million of cash, or even $75 million, I can't believe any mayors have strung us along thinking that was the case. That is fictional, in my opinion.
Mayor, what we've asked for is an interlocal agreement that sits before you. We believe we can take that and we can bond that. So it might take 2 times over a 10-year period to get there.
So the work session that we have was what are we willing to share or discuss? And I think we have some broad requirements. It's not $75 million, it's not $20 million. There may be some additional things that we will fund over a period of time that we would have to fund anyway. That pipe that, does it have a name in the Lake General? I'll call it the Lake General pipe. If it bursts, at some point, we're gonna have to replace that pipe. We have to replace that pipe whether Dan Bellows is here or whether Ravaudage is happening or not. That's something that we're gonna have to do, and there might be other things like that that we have to do. I mean, I'm just summarizing what everybody else has said. There's not $75 million at the table. I think once we took ad valorem off, there's not even $21 million at the table. It feels a lot more like $6 million at the table to me right now, potentially, that we would even be willing to negotiate and discuss. I don't know what the CD does with this information, but you know, based on what we've just done, I think there's at least 3 who said we may consider that. I didn't hear 3 saying we're gonna consider $35 million or $75 million or share ad valorem or those
The
things.
amount of money that can be generated
No,
is what we
I
can
understand,
then bond.
I understand.
We're not asking for
But I think the other clear message that you need to hear, and I certainly haven't put this to a test, is, but certainly hear 3 votes to that, and that is the difference between 75 and what the city is or isn't willing to do is not our problem. And we commend you for doing beautiful things. We want you to do beautiful things. This isn't something like, we don't want beautiful streets and sidewalks and all that. But we as a city can only do so much. So I don't know if that's a message that my commissioners concur with me on that, but I've heard over the last hour and a half, don't come a thinking you're gonna get $75 million. Would you get 7 and bond it for 75 or whatever? You know. The most we have here is 6. We'd like some more with that, and I don't know what 6 bonds. And the rest is not our problem. We're cheerleaders. We want to see beautiful things happen there. We want to incentivize it as much as possible, but there's only so much we can do.
But I think that the one thing that the city needs to look at is it's costing $10,150,000 by the city's basic standards. The city's getting roads, sewer, infrastructure that's worth $20 or $25 million based on the standards the developer's doing. So the city is getting dedicated a much better road and infrastructure system than it would be getting from someone else. And so you need to look at that as what you're getting back is a much improved system.
It is much
So
improved, but
30
as
years
Troy
down
said,
the
I
road.
mean, we can repay these things every 5 years for $200,000.
The $10,150,000 is your staff's basic.
That's
And,
It's our basic cost to implement your plan.
no, that's incorrect. That's
That
not
include
doing it to
electricity.
our staff.
That include electricity.
That's
We
not
can
doing it
pull
to
That
our
include
staff.
electricity. You pull out electric and it's in the 6 to 7 range.
Which is, by the way, where we were the last time we had the work session. We were at about that same kind of money. That's what we talked about. So that number has never been 10.
So-
whatever
so-
everybody's
so
thinking.
I-
It never was from us.
No, but you said staff to go back and come up with a number, and
Right.
that's exactly what Mr. Knight has done, is work with
Yeah.
staff in order to come up with a number of infrastructure that need to be built, regardless of what Dan's plan is, it's the infrastructure.
And that's the number, there's no Ravaudage, there's no one developer.
No, that's with electricity.
I thought the power.
It'd be
was a
much
big deal
less.
there.
And I guarantee I would not be undergrounding Duke's Power today at $1.8 million. I would not be doing that. So if that came into the city as is, I wouldn't be doing it.
Duke would come in and drop lines, right? And if the private
On
developer
both.
would be putting them underground.
Right.
That's what Duke commits to.
Right. So we're out of time at this point. We need to conclude so that we can do the business of the city at 3:30. I don't know, Randy, if you have enough to be able to continue discussions or bring something back that
Yes.
might be palatable that we could vote on, or at least have an agenda item.
Yes.
I mean, minimally, I think that within the parameters of some of the, you know, at least a majority, that there is some financial arrangement that we may be willing to consider. Doesn't mean we're going to, doesn't mean we're gonna vote on it, doesn't mean it's gonna happen. It may not, it may be a drop in the bucket for what the need is, but there is some amount that
Mr. Mayor,
it
do we have
says.
3 to do land? They have land.
You got 2, I don't know if you have 3 or not, but I'd certainly sweeten it more than that.
I would ask to see some
certainly
kind of
sweeten
land
it.
agreement, if we get 3 for that.
bet she's gonna take any land and somebody's gonna want stuff.
So you want land added to
I like
that?
this,
City
it's
land.
the
I don't know why
billboard.
it's not for
Do you want land added to that?
How do we now have support to get the city moving?
Do you want land to that or not?
I don't, I think we're mixing apples and oranges.
Okay. Well, we're gonna sit adjourned from our work session so we can continue.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate what you're doing.